This is Mile High.
Do I want to tell the story or do I want to show the message?
You've got a lot of work to do between Mile High.
The time has come where we can know
we have a responsibility, an ethical and moral responsibility.
We have to do it better in order to move people along.
Up, down, inside out.
If you get your mind right, it is not. It is a receiver of thought. Because love is my first technique.
it's now time for the show.
Welcome to the Mile High Podcast. Thank you for enjoying this wherever you are from and wherever you are, and whether it be on Spotify or iTunes. Make sure you hit subscribe because you never want to miss any Mile High tick. Okay, and I am so grateful to have you as a listener, and I want you to be always in the know in the tick world. And also, of course, if you have not cleared your calendar to be at Mile High altitude in September for Mile High, I can't believe it, 13, and don't let the 13 scare you, okay? At Mile High 13 in September, make sure you dial it in. You can get all the details at riseuptomilehigh.com. September 25th weekend. And by the way, that is a great time to come to Colorado because the leaves change. And I got to tell you, don't just go to the hotel. Spend half a day, drive somewhere in the mountains, take your team with you to Mile High and go up into the mountains and see the leaves change. It's a life-changing thing, you know, and your team appreciates when you do things with them and they'll get lifted up in the, tick vibe for sure. Okay. And I'm so thrilled to have this particular guest. He's been a guest on the Mile High stage. He's also been a guest at on the Mile High podcast, and I just love talking to him. I love his heart and soul for chiropractic and his passion and shared values. Dr. Eddie Weller has always had the desire to help people and add to their lives by giving them hope regardless of the situation. He had irritable bowel syndrome when he began at 17 years old. In his teens, he owned a DJ and boat detailing business, and that somehow moved his route to chiropractic. Later on, he went to Logan in '98. So I'm actually a little bit older in chiropractic than you. So I graduated in '96, but we're around that same time and generation. And loves upper cervical care, and just grateful to spend any time talking to you, Dr. Eddie. And I got to tell you, anytime you can watch, listen, hear Dr. Eddie Weller, you're going to learn something. So you're going to learn something today, I'm sure. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Eddie Weller.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. And the kind words, of course, is, you're looking into a mirror. So I just love what you're doing, absolutely, and how you serve, brother. So thank you for having me, man.
And I want to say this something to the audience. What he just said is super important, which is that, we have a difference of where we practice clinically, and people can practice different clinically and really have shared values. Like Dr. Dan Lyons. I love Dr. Dan Lyons. He has such a great heart for chiropractic. He practiced Gonstead. I do network. You don't have to be throwing rocks and be enemies, and when you share a principle and values in the foundation. And there's been too much of that in the history of the profession. And we're a small group, small but mighty, that value our principles, and we need to be together on what we do and the impact we're going to make in the profession, right?
No, I say it like we're all chefs, and we're all been told to cook a cheeseburger. We're not going to cook it the same way, but you're going to experience a cheeseburger. And so, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And,
yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think there's a majority mass out there and a minority class, and the minority class has to stick together because to me, that's the only true people who are holding the principles together.
Yeah, 1,000%. And that's needed right now. So I got to ask you, Dr. Eddie, for everybody that's here, how did you end up on the path of upper cervical based chiropractic?
Holy cow. Neurologically speaking, it really made sense to me. I also, when studying the spine, when I just noticed that, L5 has limited motion and L4 has limited motion, and I just worked my way up the spine, kind of studying like every joint in the spine has restricted motion due to the locking mechanism that it has. It protects itself. It's how God made this thing, to protect the nerve that leaves the spine. And I'm like, okay, so why doesn't this one lock? And I'm like, this is interesting. And so, noticing this 2-ounce vertebrae, that's holding an 8-pound bowling ball, if you will, and it's just gyrating where all of the nerves meet at the base of the skull. So it wasn't a technique thing, it was a structural thing for me initially. And so at trimester 3, 2, and 3, when you're studying anatomy and I'm in gross anatomy, I'm like, what is going on here? And then start reading, of course, these things called the green books. And so I'm reading, I'm 23 years old, 95. And I am 1995. I'm reading Palmer's Law of Life. I'm on an airplane and I'm reading this book and it's talking about once you get the big idea. I'm like, hold on a second. I thought this was about the vertebrae and bones. And then I really went down the rabbit hole of the philosophy of understanding it really has nothing to do with the spine at all. And it has everything to do with what's inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow, okay, so let's study the nervous system. And then you get geeky and you study the nervous system. And then I went, it's not even about the nervous system. It's about what's inside of the nervous system.
Right.
And then I went, I know nothing. And so it's kind of like splitting the atom, right? We figured it out and then we're like, holy cow, look at the cosmos inside of this little thing. And,
Right.
It's I always tell the story. I'm 23 and again, doing my dissection and I'm holding the sciatic nerve and I'm holding this nerve and I gutted, heart, lung, everything's out of the body and there's the nervous system, right? And I'm studying this thing and I call my instructor over, his name is Mr. Ellis. Brilliant. He would have dated Siri. And so when I'm sitting and talking to him and I said, at one time, there was electricity firing through this nerve at 268 miles an hour. We can measure that impulse. He said, yes. With his fascia on his hands, yes. And I said, where's the generator? And he looks at me and he says, what? I go, where's the generator? I understand how I used to build homes, right? I built 14 offices of mine. And so I know construction, I know plumbing. I've been gifted that way, learning it through with my father. And I'm like, where's the generator? In order to have electricity, there's a source. And he's like, where's the generator? He goes, Eddie, I've been doing this 26 years, man. And nobody's ever asked me where the heck the generator's at. And I said, help me. He goes, that's just life. And I said, that's God. And he looks at me, and that's where my relationship, because I had no God in my life growing up. And then that relationship, God brought me to Christ. That's a whole nother conversation. Chiropractic brought me to Christ. Sorry. And so when I'm sitting there and I'm studying the body and I'm studying this thing, and I'm like, we know nothing as chiropractors. It's not about fixing a vertebrae. It's not about restoring curves. It's not about, making people feel better. It's about giving the better expression, if you will, but allowing the body to do what it's supposed to do. That made sense to me. And it wasn't the Merrick system because that was dead because I learned of thermography. And when I'm learning of thermography, I'm seeing these patterns that people are having, like a fingerprint or a spinal print. And I'm like, putting people in gowns, doing full spine scans, and they're getting reproducible scans for each individual person. And the only way I noticed that I've seen clearing the graph, if you will, noticing a change throughout the entire spine was in the upper cervical spine.
Right.
And when I move the vertebrae the right way and let people to rest for about an hour, get them back up and do a second thermography scan, this has nothing to do with technique. It's just how you applied it, right? And I'm like, there's before and there's after. I did something constructive to the nervous system. Whether or not the spine is sitting like this is not up to me.
Right.
But if it's neurologically sound this way, this is how innate has to work.
Right.
And I was good with that. And it made sense to me. So in a roundabout way, that's how it happened. And it's I didn't choose upper cervical. It, in a sense, chose me because there was a lady not too long ago, 11 herniated discs, and she's scheduled to have rods in her spine, T1 to T10, all blown out. So here's her
11.
MRI.
You beat me. So the most I've heard was 6. So
I have an MRI of 11. They're gonna Harrington rod her thoracic spine. And so I said, hold on a second. And so she's, heavy chested woman. I literally put her breast on scales. And so I weighed her breast to show her. I stood her up, put it on my table that moves, put her scales up there, and put her breasts on the scales and weighed them. Over 8 pounds, 8.1, 8.2.
Wow.
16 pounds. And she's a dental hygienist. So now you're bent over. Your breasts are pulling the spine. And I said, you have to leave. I know her boss because I speak at his dental office. I'm like, you need to quit. You need to quit. So I call her. She's leaving today. For her health, she is quitting today. She's been with him 17 years. So She quit. She's like, I have a problem here. You're moving a bone here. I said, it has nothing to do with the bone, but rather what's inside of it.
Right.
And I said, those nerves that come out of your spine, the middle of your back, start here. because every nerve in the whole body meets here. And if we can level that, let's see what happens neurologically. So, of course, I'm scanning her spine and watching all of the nerves change in her thoracic spine. That was a year and a half ago-ish. She's touching her toes. She just jogged a 5K. Like, this is nuts, right? And so she's like, they were going to rod me. This is craziness. She moved a bone. And she gets adjusted about every 6 weeks-ish because that's how long her spine holds. And so everybody holds for a different time frame. And that made sense to me too. When I was going to the Gonstead clinic and I went up there to learn, I'm like, who taught Gonstead? BJ. I mean, BJ taught everybody all these different techniques, came up with over 200 techniques. And so it was interesting to watch all of them kind of tweak their own learnings, teachings from BJ, and then make their own technique. It was cool. Like Logan Basic, everybody, Thompson, right? They all have their ideas, which is great. That's how we evolve. Network, right? It's how we evolve. And when I noticed it all, I'm like, gosh, everybody's always, no matter what, any technique has, any way you adjust the spine, everybody, when they talk about miracle cases in their office, they're upper cervical. Nobody's doing a lumbar roll and says, hey, man, they get out of the wheelchair. You don't see that. And so it's every miracle case. When somebody hands you an infant, they go, well, let me check their pelvis. I don't do it. Everybody goes to the atlas. We just do. And because it's just the most vulnerable area where you can affect the entire system globally.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah.
So even Logan Basic, I remember at school, we had 187 students in our class, and everybody's like, the instructor's like, all right, we're going to get used to each other, strip. And everybody strips down in their underwear, bras, underwear. We're standing there looking at each other, says, all right, if you don't have the thong on, tuck it in your crack, everybody face down, and here we go. And all you do is see a sea of butts. And everybody's laying down, and we are doing Logan Basic. And so everybody's doing the basic, but again, when it comes to the atlas, and you're making that contact on that atlas, you just see the spine start to unravel.
Right.
And it's beautiful.
Right. 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 By the way, I have to ask you this, and it's a sidetrack from, because you went to Logan, you learned Logan, right? I didn't study Logan at Logan. My understanding is Patrick Montgomery is the man in terms of this, right, at this current time.
I talked to him last week. Yeah.
What? You talked to him last week?
Yeah.
And I read the Logan text back when I was in school, and I was like, there was amazing information in that. Did they teach vectoring?
Maybe
with sacred tumors ligament, you vector upwards.
Right. They call it getting sealing.
Yeah, sealing and vectoring.
Yeah. And so when you finally just see which which ilium's pulling into AI, so you make that contact, and then you can just 4 ounces of pressure, pressure on there to hold that, and then again watch that kind of the spine change.
Right. I was wondering if they still taught it. That's all. That they with full spine auxiliaries and all that was something that was still taught, right?
Yeah, so what they don't do any longer, and it kind of hurt my heartstrings. I was on campus 2 weeks ago and kind of walking all over. When we started, everybody had full spine x-rays done, AP and lateral, everyone. Right. And then you kind of drew lines and angles. You studied yours, and then you can study basic, which pelvis, along with all the exams. Stopped all of that. Nobody gets x-rays any longer. Even in clinic, when you start care as a patient in clinic, no x-rays. Until your 6th or 7th visit to where their symptoms are not resolving, maybe you're missing something, then we should take films.
See, because I know we switched upper cervical weight to the other end of the spine, but Logan and Palmer had a really good relationship. I mean, my understanding, they had a deep respect for each other.
BJ said if he could have, he would have adopted him.
That's what I heard, that he'd have him as a son. So, and there you have two people, other ends of the technique spectrum, other ends of the spine, literally, right? Yeah. But still have respect for the spine, for the nerve system, for the adjustment, for the impact, like have reverence for the precision of an adjustment, and have reverence for how awful a subluxation be to a person's life.
Yeah,
right?
And it was an appreciation and an intention that they both had that was similar.
Right, exactly. Right. And to see that lose from the Logan education is sad, and it's getting lost in education, across the board, which is why learning from people like Eddie now, is important because you've got to go to the resources that you have, right? And there are, a handful of really good resources in the upper cervical world that you want to go to, which brings me to what I wanted to ask you. So, like, as I said, I actually I might have it right here. Maybe I don't. Where is it? Yeah, here we go. I have this right here, the Logan Basic Methods.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which it read, and I've got I've got sticky notes in it and stuff. But here you go. This is what I was going to segue to. You decided to put out some textbooks about upper cervical, about instrumentation. What spurred you to want to do that?
There really wasn't, Titronics. I love the pattern analysis. Thermography is really temperature is temperature, right?
Mm-hmm.
It comes down to the software. Are you able to establish a pattern? And Titronics
Right.
is what their software does. And it made sense to me. I'm like, okay, but why isn't it in a text booklet for doctors, chiropractors?
Right.
There isn't. There's pamphlets, little stapled packets together. I'm like, we need something professional. And so, I did that with another buddy of mine. We put it together. I'm like, hey, it was a doc that was associating with me. I said, hey, you want to do this, man? I've got all these years of research, and you love doing research. And he did a lot of the neurology stuff and helped put it together. And Heidi Havoc, we just went nuts with a ton of her stuff. She's a rock star. So the references in the book are awesome. There's zero technique in the book, zero. There's no endorsement of any of that. It's all science, objective, and we call it evidence-based. What the heck is evidence-based when it comes to a chiropractor? Some sort of objectivity is justifying your evidence-based. And so it's kind of like I have a fever. What proof do you have? I use a thermometer. That's evidence-based. Patients complaining of X, this is how I prove it objectively. Great.
Right.
And so patients complaining of a health issue, great. How do I, as a chiropractor, prove it objectively that it could be something neurologic? Thermography made sense. So hence the textbook. So we talk about that. It's a uniform. It talks about, regardless of the technique application, we as chiropractors need what's a chiropractic exam?
Right.
And so that's the problem, is we don't have one that's a unifier. Like when I go,
Right.
like I said, we go to a cardiologist. If you're a cardiologist, brother, and I am, we do the same cardiology exams.
Right.
I don't care what they are. We just do. And that's what
Right.
the patient, and here's my thing. The patient expects those.
Right.
Because that's what they do. The patient doesn't know what to expect when they see a chiropractor.
No, and it's sad. It's very sad.
And it's ridiculous. We're over 100 plus years old. Come on already. You know
Right.
what I mean?
And that's sad. I had someone who spoke at a conference I was at once, and he said, and they said very, very wise in my opinion, in my point of view, like, even if you have different approaches, different ways you adjust the spine, use the same indicators, use the same objective indicators, and so that people have an expectation when they go into office that they're assessing something. We don't have, I'm going to ask you this, we don't even have people assessing people at initial, they just lay them down before they do anything. Like, how important do you think a thorough initial exam is?
I mean, there across the street from my office is a chiropractic franchise that I will not mention.
Mm-hmm.
And I have about 2 or 3 patients a month. They learn about my sign in front of my office is on my mailbox. It's about 4x4. That's how big my sign is. And so it's just a referral base. But when they hear through the grapevine, I see. So what brings you in? I went across the street, or I went to this other one, and they laid me down. To your point, no exams, and rocked them.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, okay. And I said, what imaging do they have? I can call the doctor and get the data that they collected on day one. They said there were no exams. They immediately laid me down and went to town. That's a problem. This isn't a mission trip.
Yeah.
We're not doing hair, right? I always say that. And so I have, my exams.
To me, that's a disservice and it's malpractice, personally.
It is. It really is. I do 23 exams on day one. I love collecting data. I'm a data junkie. I've created this protocol, the Atlas indicators. I'll blast it out on Mile High. I'll send a password to it. It's just an exam of which side laterality did the Atlas go. So regardless of technique, you got a really, really good chance of knowing if it went that way or this way. Because if it did go this way and you're thrusting into that, man, it's a bad situation for that person.
Right.
So,
yeah, you don't switch sides of Atlas visit to visit. Stay left and just stay right. But there are people that do that, You know,
I know a ton of them that do that. Even in the
yeah.
upper cervical world, when I was a student, I was getting adjusted on a right atlas. I did that for 4 years.
Mhm.
And I won't talk about the instructors that told me that my atlas was right, via looking at an X-ray in the air on a window. But again, it is what it is. I learned a bunch of studying it, and I'm like, holy cow, I've been getting
Right,
adjusted the wrong
right.
way.
And
And so
again, it's really mobilization, not an adjustment.
it
You
is. It is.
right?
And it's unfortunate. It is, you and I definitely have this same belief, no doubt, that a cavitation is not an adjustment because you didn't cavitate to subluxate,
Right, right,
right? And so
right,
emotional, chemical, physical stressors, electrical stressors, that causes cellular chaos, and it can just subluxate a vertebrae, right? And so therefore it doesn't, like, look at Logan Basic. There's no cavitation, but you're making an adjustment.
right, right. Well,
So
and
similar
then
to yeah.
and that goes back to, do students even learn that they're not the one that does the adjustment? I don't think students learn that.
I
At
don't
least
understand
very
that.
few schools teach
Right.
that. As
Yeah.
compared to, and I was just holding that Logan textbook. It wasn't only BJ that said that. In that Logan textbook it talks about that
Yep.
innate is doing the adjustment, and Logan said,
Yep.
I do adjust atlas, but it's from the other end of the spine, right?
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
Right.
Sure.
Right. Or
And it doesn't matter how you do it, just do
right.
it and then prove
Right.
your work, right?
You're addressing
And
it that way.
yeah,
Yeah. And
I think
it's
it's,
there.
as I tell all of my patients, right before I make the adjustment, I explain the whole toggle mechanism with the drop table and I explain the whole thing. I says, understand that I don't know, as your doctor, I'm going to tell you this. And they say, okay, that's when I get attention. I don't know where the bone needs to go.
Right.
I just know
Right.
how it's misaligned.
Right.
So it took a destructive force to cause your spine to be out of position. It takes me, the chiropractor, to introduce a constructive force.
Right.
We call it an adjustive thrust, but a constructive force to that vertebrae. And then the body's intelligence is a lot smarter than me, I promise you.
I got to tell you, you just made me smile. But you often do. Well, because in my office, right, I do network. I don't call it an adjustment. I say I'm going to put in an adjustive. I say IVE. I say I put it in an adjustive force, not a thrust. I say an adjustive force, so your body can do with what it needs to do, right? And that's how I describe it to them.
Yep.
And so because I don't want to take credit, right?
Take me out of the picture.
I want to give their body credit for the body's how smart, and that they're a participant, and that we're collaborating on them moving in a different trajectory with their health, right?
Yes.
And their innate intelligence is the smartest doctor there is.
God made. And so as I always say, we're mechanics, and you're bringing me a car that's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. You're bringing me every car, regardless of age, works better tuned up. And so what I do is understand that I'm not the mechanic. I just
Right.
work for them.
Right.
So I'm the tool in
Right.
which the mechanic uses.
Right.
And so, when I teach that way, it takes us out of the picture. I think Dr. Kale, senior, way back in the day at the seminars, we were out in Spartanburg, and just, man, he said, Eddie, let me tell you something. And here I am, I'm 25 years old. I'm going through his seminars, and he goes, we do 1% of the work.
Mhm.
Innate does 99% of the other work, but our ego takes 100% of the credit.
I'm typing this down because that's a good one. We do 1% of the work. All right.
Innate does the other 99% of the work, and
Yep.
our ego takes 100% of the credit.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
It's just awesome. He just nailed that, and I'll never forget that. And it's it's there's so much to
I wonder if he said that or someone else said it initially. I don't know.
What's it? That
I
quote?
wonder if that was
Yeah.
if that was
I
a
don't
kid,
know. Yeah,
from someone else.
that'd be a good one to ask AI, but
Yeah.
and see
Well,
where that's at. But
yeah.
it's interesting.
And you mentioned Cal, and maybe we can help this for the audience. And I learned upper cervical at Sherman, and I do toggle frequently. I enjoy doing a toggle recoil side posture. I learned knee chest also in the Sherman package, right? I didn't study it beyond what I learned at Sherman, but I felt like I got a solid education in it at Sherman. There may be people that disagree with me, but I felt like I got a solid education in knee chest at that time. And I did the Blair elective, and I studied several Blair seminars beyond that. But I love toggle recoil, and I noticed that some toggle people do toggle where there's a recoil, right? And that's how I do it. And so does some people do various toggles that really don't look like a recoil, that look like it's really more laying on or a solid thrust. For people that are on this, can you share a little bit about the difference or why of that?
Well, you have something that even in a side posture position, look at Nuka,
Right.
And so Nuka is just that tricep pull, right?
Right.
So they're pulling and they're just putting the force into where they feel like it went. And Nuka is very structural based. I mean, you look at like Atlas orthogonal and stuff, spine, when you're laying on your side and there's, that kind of stuff. And the intention is still there to introduce a force. BJ adjusted side posture solid, and that hurts. Oh, it hurts because you are thrusting through the joint. I had one of those done. Andy Roberts did that to me at the Dove House at Palmer, and I got off the table with fists, and I'd go, Andy, walk away. Walk away. I said, "Why?" I go, "Don't you ever do that to somebody again, man." I said, it hurt so bad. And he was laughing. I'm like, oh. But again, that's what they did. It was bam, side posture solid to shift that bone. In 1951 is when Thompson's like, BJ, check this out. We can have this drop mechanism so the PTA, Palmer-Thompson adjustment, was the drop mechanism, came out in 1951.
Right.
None of that research was done really in the research clinic because the research was 1935 to 51. Sure, there was some research afterwards, but there wasn't a ton. And so with those 16 years of research was done in knee posture and in side posture, both of which were adjusted on transverse process only. And I know that stirs the pot when it comes in the knee chest world because they all adjust a posterior arch. And BJ was pretty adamant about no posterior arch adjusting. It was all over the green books. But again, who cares? I mean, the argument is who cares? If you're clearing a graph, that right neurological, because BJ was all about the scan. If you're clearing a graph, hitting somebody with a freaking shovel, and you can do it consistently, then do it consistently, right? And so if your intention is to clear the graph, then go for it. We just noticed, BJ, to be clearing the graph, you're in the side posture position to do that. The toggle joint, it's kind of like a car jack. And so when you see a car jack, it's called a scissor jack. And that scissor jack, jacking up a car, has a ton of force. And it can be done very, very fast. But a bullet is only as good as and this was the argument with Logan, is the bullet is only as good as its speed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so moving that vertebrae and torquing that vertebrae down and doing that quick to introduce the force where innate then takes that vertebrae and unlocks and goes, there it is. There's the adjustment. To me, in a neutral position made sense because of the shape of the joints. And if the vertebrae is moving this way, then if my vertebrae subluxates this way, then I should lay down and get adjusted in that neutral position. Mm-hmm. And so this is where that side posture comes in. The toggle, actually, this is the toggle joint. This is the recoil. So people think the recoil is this and recoiling back. That's toggle. This is a toggle joint. The recoil is the atlas recoiling back and forth. That's where that came from. Toggle recoil. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting to when people understand the whole mechanism of that vertebrae because it doesn't move left or right. It moves this way based on its condyle. Mm-hmm. If it's moving that way, then the thrust has to be that way. Mm-hmm. And so there, if it moves this way and the thrust has to be that way, then taking a vertebrae that has gone this way and twisting the spine, you're not moving the atlas. Yeah. You're moving other vertebrae and you're cavitating and loosening up joints, sure, but you're absolutely not moving an atlas.
I want to ask you something about thermography. Before I do that, I want to tell you something. That you know a lot about chiropractic history more than the average person, so you may know what I'm going to say, but you may not. Before I say that, please, how do people get in touch with Eddie more? How do they learn more? If they want more Eddie, where do they go?
Well, I am all over Facebook. So you can find me on there. Of course, I love posting and stuff. So that's the easiest way. I know I'm starting to get heavier in Instagram. I had TikTok, big followers at one time. I kind of get back into that. I don't know. But that's how I do it. You can always, private message me. I usually get 12 to 15. private messages of different docs that watch videos, say, how do I learn this? How do I learn that? I started something called the Chiro Legacy Club, where people can download to watch the videos. They pay a monthly fee. I have been through heavy, heavy prayer, and I'm pulling all of those videos out of private in the library, and I'm going to post all of them on for free. There's 88 videos, training videos for free on YouTube.
Wow.
For free. I'm going to put them all up there on the library. I don't care anymore. It's not a money play for me. It's a legacy play. And I'd say, and as I always say too, brother, I know you absolutely feel the same. I'm not the way, but I'm a way. And if this way makes sense for you, then I want to take you under my wing and show you and give you everything that I have. And if it doesn't, great. But find something that resonates with you, and just don't blame chiropractic for its failure. The chiropractor is the one that fails.
Right. So here's the thing I want to mention, because you're talking about toggle and going off with different ones. I don't know if you know this, but my stepdad, I've heard lots of stories from Donnie over the years about his education and things he learned in school and various chiropractic things. Okay. He went to Columbia, right, which was a straight school at the time, before it became NYCC and further down the rabbit hole that we're seeing in so many chiropractic schools. When he learned full spine toggle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he said in class they had to do toggle on lumbar mammillary. Yeah.
And you see that in the Gonstead knee chest position, right? Knee chest was not for upper cervical in Gonstead. The Gonstead chair was. But it allowed the spine to go in that concavity, and you thrust it through that concavity in the lumbar spine.
And sadly, and sadly, people don't even learn any of this in school. That's the sad thing.
Well, they can't, because chiropractic school, especially watch the old school videos at Palmer, you had gym class. Right. You had PE, physical education of practicing. My my son is on a junior PGA. He plays 5 days a week minimum of practice only, not on a course. And why? Because that's what the coach says you do. So that's what BJ did. You had 3 to 4 hours of practicing your recoil adjustment. So when you're ready to go. You're ready. Not like, man, I don't know. Does this feel right? I'm not sure. I hope I don't hurt them. So there's no schools that are practicing that. So this is what we do, is drills in the clinics and the seminars that I teach. I do hands-on. I do small groups of 10. And if we do hands-on, we're drilling to people like, okay, I need a break. I need a break. My hand.
Right.
And I have exercises that I've come up with exercise rubber bands and different kind of push-ups and stuff. I'm in my 50s, and I still appreciate my speed. And so I stay in shape, you know what I mean? And so it's really important for us to do that. It's not like, you're coming on over like, gosh, I ate too much at lunch. Yeah, get on the table, I'll adjust it. No, what are you doing right now? Right? And there's another thing I do is this, I know you appreciate the open. I used to have that in one of my offices, and there's no talking when I adjust. None, zero. Right. People are like, hey, how's the weather? Hey, how's that wedding last week? And this is what sets me off with these subluxated chiropractors putting microphones on people's spines in order to get. God. Yeah. Right. And so people have come after me like, why are you judging people? I'm not judging them. I'm judging their act. You are belittling those that went to prison by getting cavitations with a girl out to here just so they look hot on camera. And then here you are looking at the camera. Oh, I got that one. They're not even looking at somebody. It's not a toy, right? We live in this, and it sets me off. Right.
Man. No. I understand. So, so here's the thing. I want to, and this put me through, I'm looking at the time, most likely wrap up on this. I think my understanding is that, and maybe not in the whole world, but in the U.S., I think the only school that really teaches pattern, and I may be wrong, is Sherman. And people talk about Sherman being known for the philosophy, and it is known for that. And at the same time, I really think that the thing that makes Sherman unique is that aspect of that pattern. Yeah. That the person's subluxated, their nerve system is compromised when their nerve system's stuck. And that when they're dynamic, they're healthy. And I talk to students all the time at programs that I teach or different things, or I meet them somewhere, and that concept's completely void of their consciousness. I think it's a
they're completely ignorant to it, right?
yeah, right,
They're
right.
ignorant to it. And this is why, again, the infrared book, if you can go to Amazon, just type in infrared thermography chiropractic, you'll see the textbook there and just
Right.
purchase that. It explains pattern to a T. And you'll look at it and go, why didn't my school teach me this?
Yes, yes. And I think it's one of the most brilliant things in chiropractic was that conceptual model of is the person's dynamic or static, that they're ill, right?
Yeah.
Not to confuse disease, but their nerve system is not healthy when it's static, and that their nerve system is healthy when it's dynamic. And
Well,
that
I look at it even as life. Where's more life, in a pond or a river?
right,
Right.
right,
And so it's the whole point of the adjustment, as I said, is we talk all the time is that we have invasionary forces coming to our matter. So when you're adjusted, it puts up like this force field as it can adapt better to these forces to resist either toxicity or stressors. But when you're subluxated, static, you're in a you're not balanced. There's chaos within the matter. And so Didi would talk about tone all the time, where you're completely homeostatic, where the body is getting every neurologic or innate impulse to every cell, tissue, and organ, to where it's able to function to the best of its ability. That's the adjustment. And so it just so happens thermography will prove if you're static or not static, right? If it's kind of imbalanced. And it's always done that. I had a lady last week, she was with me, she was number 26. In St. Louis. And I go, do you realize you're the 26th person I've started in this office, in St. Louis? And I practiced for 10 years in Chicago, and I moved to St. Louis 19 years ago. And so I said, do you understand this? And I said, look at this now. 4,400 people later, here we are. And so I started over 4,000. Just started my 12,000th patient. It's kind of cool. And so when I scanned her, I said, look at this scan. This was right here 18 years ago. And look at today's reading. And they overlapped. Which means when you subluxate, you will subluxate the exact same structural way every single time. And what happens is that shoulder goes, that hip goes, one leg gets shorter on everyone. We all have our own structural and neurologic patterns. It just so happens that this scanning instrument proves if you're static or not. You need to be adjusted. And people look, they have a 40-inch screen, they get scanned, they look right on up, I'm out. They get it. Once they understand pattern, they get it. They don't want to be adjusted in my office. And chiropractors believe more adjustments is better. I don't. I believe you plant the seed, you water it, keep watering it. No, you check the soil. And when the soil needs to be watered, then you water it. You don't water it every day. Chiropractors believe you should water the darn thing every day. You'll kill it.
Right.
Too much of a neurologic bombardment.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You're adjusting over and over.
Yep. And that's vital. That's vital to understand in the chiropractic art. And and most people do not learn that, and it makes all the difference in the world. I mean, that is central in the work I do. It's like the foundation of that is the person dynamic or static. And we have lots of indicators to look at that. But you want to see, because a person's too stable, too much stability, that's illness, right? Yes. Right? Because actually a dynamic system has a level of instability. If a dynamic system, right?
Because it's always in flux.
Right, because it's in flux, exactly. And versus that, I want to be just balanced. I want my nervous system to be balanced. Well, actually, no, you want to have a degree of it, I'm not talking about a graph line, but like the nervous system has a dynamic as a certain level of instability as compared to a certain level as too much stability, because you're not growing if there's too much stability. Right.
You know what's so cool about this, viewer, as you're watching this right now, we have two very different ways of approaching the spine, yet we are high-fiving one another when it comes to what we do and how we do it.
Right. Well, and the foundational values of the profession. And that can't be lost because it's humanity's at stake, right? There's more than chiropractic at stake. There's humanity at stake because that's vital for health. The person's nervous system is dynamic, right?
And it's, the jail, who says, we went to jail for chiropractic. I said, forget about them going to jail for chiropractic. I want you to be a prisoner in jail, watching a chiropractor adjust, and I can promise you, they're not asking you, can I rub it here? Do you want any cleanse? What's the best nutritional thing? How about some acupuncture? They did not do that in jail. What they did is they found a vertebrae that was to the best of their ability, that was misaligned, and their intention was to restore neurologic function so that person's better off. Period.
And I also have to say is like, do you think the person went to jail because they couldn't find another way to make $10?
That's exactly right.
It was like well, I don't have no other way to make a living, so I guess I'm going to jail. Like, or
Might as well go.
yeah. So I'm kind of out of options. So, or did they have something that was the principle of what they did that they couldn't lie about it or couldn't be untruthful or whatever wording you want to say, you know?
Yep. I mean, I tell always the story when I was getting drywall from Home Depot. Down the block from my office is a Home Depot. There are 5 full-time chiropractors working there. 5.
Oh, yeah. I
And
once was at I was once at a baseball game and I bought a hot dog and the hot dog was a chiropractor that I knew.
the vendor.
The vendor.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
See what
vendor.
I'm saying? And it's so shame. Here's the thing. To me, you can't make chiropractic great again. I
Yeah.
shot a video on this. You can't do it because it never lost its greatness.
Hmm.
You have to make the chiropractor great again,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so it never principles. It's like you can't make what Jesus did better.
And,
Sorry.
I gotta tell you, I'm really grateful to get any time I spend with you because my conversations with you are always so deep and so in alignment. Because you love what I love. Where can people see Dr. Weller next? Ooh, I lost you. Are you there?
I'm going to Sherman in
All right.
July. I'm teaching a seminar out there, upper cervical and the whole protocols. I do a day 1, day 2, day 3 protocol. I've also written a book called It Just Makes Sense, and I retweaked it for all of those that are interested in upper cervical work, where you can put your own information about your office in it. It's a brochure that it's 82 pages, and it's a perfect booklet that I hand to patients. So, I mean, there's travel. The best way to do it is find me, Dr. Eddie Weller, but just go to Facebook. Go to Eddie Weller on Facebook, and you will
Awesome.
see all of what I post. So,
Well, thank you so much for giving your time to the Mile High audience and to chiropractic and chiropractors and chiropractic students everywhere. And I look forward to seeing you at Lyceum because I'll be there. And I hope to see you in higher ground soon too. So
yes. As you know, they always say it's I have no way of knowing what you don't know until you know it. Then
Yep.
you must make contrast between what you thought you knew, but now know you did not know it then because you know it now. When I read
Yes.
that, when BJ said that, and I read that, I didn't understand it, and I had to study it. Now I memorized the darn thing from 30 years ago. But it's when you think you know, open up the door to something else that's possible in your life, and you'll have a bigger aha as growth as a chiropractor. And that's the beauty of going to seminars. That's the beauty of going to Mile High. It's a beauty. Go visit schools, other chiropractors. And it's, again, when you think you're like, I know what I know, and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing to people? You have this aha. And it's the coolest thing because I had a guy, 82 years old, just contact me, and he goes, I'm watching your videos, and I don't know if I've ever made an adjustment. I graduated when I was 20. And that's craziness. Could you imagine?
Yeah,
And so,
well, that's the thing is a lot of people are Reggie Gold used to say this, you should go back to your chiropractic schools and ask them for a refund for not giving you a chiropractic education,
amen.
Yeah,
Amen.
sadly. But we are where we are right now. So I appreciate you that we're on a path to have a renaissance in chiropractic that chiropractic is actually happening. So, and I look forward to seeing you and everybody keep changing spines, lives, and minds with chiropractic.